Can you hear me? Welcome to Howl. We are really happy to be able to present a selection of Richard Hambleton paintings from our Arturo Vega collection, which was anticipated trying to do this for a long time. And with the help of our director and my colleague Doug, the three of us selected the artworks in the room. There might be another show in a year and a half. More to come. So in the meantime, we've decided to have a couple events during the run of the show, which is going to run to May 10th. And for this month, we've decided to contact 3 people that knew Richard, and each of them has their own story and relationship or what they know. And basically, they're going to come up here and talk about what they want about him. And then afterwards, we'll take a few questions if there's time. And the artists that are here, you know, if they're in the gallery, we might do a casual conversation about some of the art in the room, either with Eileen or Curt or myself. And what we're going to do is start in a couple of minutes. If you need to go to the bathroom, do it now, or refreshment. And then we won't do any refreshments until after the thing is over. Okay, so we want your attention. With all that said, I want to introduce Eileen, Doster, and Hanavan, and Curt Hoppe. Right. You're going to have your cigarette first? Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, I just want to add that Curt has decided to show some photos from a session that he did with Arturo and Richard in 2011 for his Downtown Portrait series, which was inspired by Arturo. So he contacted them for a 3 p.m. session. They showed up around 10 or 11 p.m. And you're going to see some photos at some point tonight. I think Eileen's going to go last, so I'd like to introduce the evening with Anne.
Hanavan. Hi, I'm Anne Hanavan. So, it's so great to see so many people. Can you guys hear me? It's so great to see so many people here. And how many people in here knew Richard, or sort of was like around New York at that time? Okay, great. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out. Okay, so a lot of you. I like that. Okay, so I met Richard through a character named Baby Gregor. I don't know if you guys, anybody remember Baby Gregor? Okay, yeah. So I met Baby, and he was also a character. He went to school with my sister. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and Baby comes jumping into the apartment saying, "You have to come meet my new boyfriend." And I was like, "Okay. Great, let's go." You know. So, anyways, we go, and he was living in that loft on what is it by the park over there? What's the name of that? Eldridge? Is that Eldridge? Ridge. Was it Ridge Street? Maybe Christie, right across from the park. Anyways, near Houston, near where the Whole Foods is now. I've been here for 40-something years, and I have no idea where I am, obviously. Christie, yeah, the Christie Street loft. So, anyways. So I go to the Christie Street loft, I walk in, and there's like unframed Warhols on the floor, and like, this guy is obviously not a gay man, and I was like, okay, but Baby had lots of crushes. And so that's when I met Richard, and we became friends. Now, I kind of lost track of him for a little bit, you know what I mean? Like around that time, like I wasn't really hanging out there, but we'd bump into each other. We both partook in the same lifestyle of, we liked powders that people sold on street corners. So, if you get my drift. So, we would bump into each other. And then it was...
You saying you did dope?
Yes. Heroin. And so we became fast friends about a year and a half later. And I ended up moving in with Richard. And we were like brother and sister. He was like, we were like partners in, you know, I don't want to say a suicide pact, but we were like really running hard, you know what I mean? And, but we became very close. And we lived together on Orchard Street. Does anybody remember Stephen, who had that magazine, I think it was called Island Magazine? Do you remember Stephen? He's good friends with Erica. And so she was another figure. And this woman, Bonnie, that unfortunately never got off the powders. She's still around. I saw her. She's not doing well a couple of years ago. But so we were all living at Stephen's place on Orchard Street, and the living room was turned into his studio, you know, and throughout every level, and this is like, so there's like 86, 87, so this is like 87, 88 or something like that. So throughout Richard's life, as you know, he's been really up, 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 and really down, 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 but never so down that you couldn't like he had this lady, I honestly, I think she was Japanese, married to a Swiss guy. She was commissioning him to do paintings, and she would come, I think it was something as simple as like 3 paintings 3 or 4 times a year when she would come to town. And you know, that was one of a few sources of income. And Arturo, I mean, Arturo was a great
He supported him.
yeah, he was a great supporter of Richard, and a good friend. I mean, it was a beautiful relationship. So, you know, he could keep it together, and he would, you know, I know he had a lot of, like, how can I say it, with a lot of galleries sort of pulled back from him at that time, you know what I mean? He was sort of unreliable and...
No kidding.
Yeah. And so, you know, it was really fun for yourself kind of thing. You know, like you might be sitting here looking at his art and thinking, well, no, he really had these ups and downs. But he always did it with like grace and charm. He was always very well dressed, even if it was like tattered, you know what I mean? He always had a bike. I mean, everybody knows about the car that he used to have, but when I knew him, he always had bikes up until when he died. And he was always riding the bikes to cop or go to get art supplies or whatever he had to do. And I remember he used to cut his brushes, like he would get these brushes. Sometimes he would swipe the brushes when he didn't have enough money, but he would like cut into the brushes in all these different ways. And he was really meticulous and ritualistic about so many things, especially about the way he painted. And it was really impressive that the level that we were at in our addiction, most people can't create, you know what I mean? Like usually the addiction robs them of their creativity, or else they sort of spin out in one note kind of thing, and Richard was always expanding in different ways. I mean, everybody loves the shadow paintings. He loved the shadow paintings, then he hated the shadow paintings, then people would, you know what I mean, then he made money from the paintings, so like, you know, he would make them cheap, sell them for whatever, to like, so many different people. I could go on and on about the people who, whatever, it doesn't even matter. But like the beautiful paintings, the blood paintings, like, so he had, the blood paintings were wild because, you know, they were, he started doing the blood paintings when he wouldn't have paint. You know what I mean? Like it was like another way, another medium for him to create, because he could not stop creating. And then they became so beautiful, and then they were doing the gold leaf, and then they were like, you know, I mean, it was really...
It's the resin in it.
Which the resin, exactly. And it was just really fascinating. And, you know, Richard, when I ended up getting clean, I kind of had to take a step back from Richard for a little bit, you know what I mean? Because we were just too close. I mean, the people who knew me, I don't know if you've seen the films, I mean, we were really close. It wasn't just at Stephen's house that we lived. We lived at Stephen's place, then we lived, where did we live after that? Oh, we lived at the gas station. Does anyone remember the gas station? We lived at Linus Spaces at the gas station with Baby, which was a whole other thing. But, you know, actually, at the gas station, because there was so much room, I don't know if you remember the big, you know, he would paint in there, and he was able to do these really big pieces, which were amazing. And sadly, he sold them for like nothing, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people took advantage of that. He also did a whole series of these, all these gold bricks. They were longer than they weren't the little squares. They were long brick ones, and he did like this whole thing, like a big, I remember it was hanging on the wall. It was absolutely amazing, and he was so mad at the guy who bought it from him because he just like, you know, people knew that he was desperate, you know, and yeah, that's the sad part. But then,
Well, he was a drug addict.
well, yeah, we
He
were
needed a cop, and the cop didn't cost money.
right, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, Richard, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying that he was a drug addict, so he would sell things. I was a drug addict too, and I'm still an addict with cigarettes. And, you know, you do anything if you have to cop. And that's basically Richard. I truthfully don't think he was ever really broke, because he could do the paintings and, you know, sell them right away. So,
Well, I lived with him, and he was definitely broke. There was times when he,
Yeah.
you know, you know, you're an addict, so
Well,
when you
yeah, no,
use,
I know
you
what you're
use, and
talking
then you
about.
use till you don't have anything anymore, and then there's like a whole thing.
well,
But
anyway, but he always had enough to cop. He copped. That's
he could always get it together to do it. Yeah, no, 1,000%. Yeah.
So, at any rate, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just
Oh no, that's okay.
wanted
That's
to
okay.
interject a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean that's the reality of addiction, right? And he and I were both deep in that, as I mentioned. But then when I got clean, I had to sort of separate because it was too much of a trigger for me. And then once I kind of got it together, I opened a store on Ludlow Street, and at that time, Richard and we were keeping in touch. I mean, we weren't like hanging out, but he had that place on Orchard Street, the place where he had the building, and then he was going to call it he was going to call it Your Gallery. Yeah, he had this dream of saying it, Your Gallery. So he was going to do the downstairs, and it's Your Gallery. And Richard was very, he was very excitable, and he is a visionary. Like, he kind of knew what he was going to do at a very young age. There was a famous scroll that everybody talks about, and blah, 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 blah. But, like, he really had this vision of how he was going to take his life. Not take his life, sorry, but, you know, where his life was going to take him and his art. And he kind of stuck to it. It's kind of wild. But, so he's calling it Your Gallery and all this stuff. And at the time, I was making films, and I was doing, like, this installation stuff. He was super supportive. I did this thing at the Chelsea, and he came, and he was like,
And about what year was that? Just to,
oh,
like,
when
I don't need to, like, just
what
about what year that was thereabouts.
when I got clean was like 27 years ago, 27 years ago, 27, 28 years ago, something like that. So around that time. And
It's like an AA meeting.
I know, right? Sorry, guys.
Oh,
We're going to do the Serenity Prayer at the end. There'll be a circle in the other room if you want to join us. So, but yeah, so I mean, it was kind of amazing. And at that time, that's when the Italians came into his life, who, you know, the Giorgio Armani's phase of his life, where they started like pumping money into Richard, tons of money.
Andy and Vlad.
Yeah, the Italians. And, you know, that became a whole thing. I don't want to get into all the ups and downs, the illegal stuff, but it's just a lot of things. But the one thing it did do for Richard was it got him back. The one thing, they weren't great people, but it really got him back in, like, that kind of blue chip world. I mean, like, there was something that went for an auction at, like, ridiculous prices, and Mick Jagger was buying stuff, and Armani had put up, I want to say, $5 million. I think each show was like $1 million. It was New York, London, Moscow, and Italy, right? So Milan or something, or Rome, I can't remember.
Yeah, and then back here to Phillips.
Yeah, in New York, yeah, that was incredible. And at this time, Richard was having, ever since I knew Richard, he had health issues, and at this time when this big show was coming on, he was having some health issues in regards to
Cancer.
yeah, the cancer in the
that
face.
sore.
Right, and so, you know, he was excited, but I remember the phone call that I got from him before I met him over at the show, and, you know, he's such a beautiful man. Like, if you see in all the photos, you know what I mean, that he really was all about, like, you know, to the last breath of, like, you know, he always had this, like, kind of chic look about him, even if it was just, like, you know, the trousers, and he knew what he was doing. Right, so that was kind of, it was happy and sad. And then there's, I encourage you to see, if you're interested in Richard, I encourage you to watch the documentary. There's a great documentary that Oren Jacoby, or whatever his name is, I'll get it for you later. But I remember somebody reached out to me about being in the documentary, and of course I went to Richard first before I said yes to it. And he was happy about it. I mean, he was happy that they were making it, you know, because I think he knew this guy was an Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker. So it was really like high-level production as far as documentaries go, and the music was great, and I think it's a great movie. And he did the festival rounds and stuff like that, and then when it opened in theaters, because it had to open in a few theaters, it opened in New York. I saw him at the Tribeca when it opened at Tribeca, and then like he died right when it opened in like a year after it did the festivals and stuff like that. Well, he didn't really care for the film. That's a whole other thing. He wanted the film to happen, but just with Richard, I mean, I lived with Richard for years, and like he would paint something, it would be absolutely beautiful, but he didn't like it. It's not finished. It's this. It's that. It's da 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 da. And so, as much as he wasn't thrilled about
I think that he was
the film,
because I was supposed to photograph him that night. I didn't go because I was leaving for Portugal the next day. And, oh, I'm sorry. And it's my understanding that he was very disappointed in the movie because they would put too much emphasis on the drug stuff and not enough on the art stuff. That's basically the way I look at it.
well, when I talked to him, it was sort of the same way. And for me, I knew Richard. When I was an addict and he was an addict, and I knew Richard when I wasn't an addict and he wasn't an addict. And I kind of see both sides of the end result of the film. You know what I mean? Because the drugs are the story, and he was sort of like, oh, the drugs are drugs. I'm like, Richard, your life, you've never stopped using drugs. He would leave me messages on my answering machine. I don't want to get too emotional. Like after I got clean, he would leave me messages. I wish I still had. He would leave me crazy messages, like, remember we got in a fight with Linus about this or that, and da da. You know, and, like kind of these funny things. And I was bartending the time I'd come home at like 6 in the morning. I'd be like, what? And then, but he would leave me these messages because I had a store at the time, and I was going to Vegas a lot for these like trade shows, these like clothing trade shows called Magic. Anyways, and he would leave me messages saying, and take me to Vegas, I feel I want to get clean, and I was this, that, and I'd be like, holy shit, I'd call him the next morning, he'd be like, high as a kite, like, no, I just, you know, da da da, you know what I mean, like, so it's sad. I really wish that Richard had gotten clean, and our friendship clean was weirdly, I mean, when we were using together, I just thought like no one could know me better than, you know, than Richard. Like we've been through everything together, you know what I mean? Like this kind of thing. We were never lovers. We were just like brother and sister. That's how I always thought about it. But when I got clean, like I could see the excuses and the this and the that, and like as much as I loved him like a brother, it was heartbreaking. And like, so when he would give me these glimmers of hope about getting clean, I'd be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And sadly he never did. And you know, it was, the film will, I think that the film is a beautiful tribute to a man who struggled with a lot of darkness. And through that, was able to create the most incredible collection of work. And I don't know if you guys know this from Howl, but he even knew what he wanted to do when he died. He worked with this black flat paint, as you can see on these walls over here. There's a lot of it throughout the collections also. There's many forms, but this particular, he made a lot of money off that black paint. Let's just put it over there, right? He even contacted the company and asked if this would be possible. He wanted to be cremated, put his ashes into the paint, right? This is how creative this man, this whole man's being was creating, even when his body was giving up on him. He wanted the ashes to go into the paint, and then he wanted a friend of his who used to be a nurse turned gallerist to have the syringes put syringes in like a number of syringes and then give them to various people. He said, yeah, I would get one too. But there would be like a handful of people that these syringes would go to, and then they were supposed to do with it what they wanted, like creatively. And I always thought, oh, shit, I'm gonna put mine in a plastic box, and I'm just gonna, not like a thing, and I'm gonna put a little splatter some out, and then just leave it. You know, I had this whole idea of what I wanted to do, a tribute to my brother, my friend, you know. So, I don't know, I think I've talked long enough, but I could go on and on for hours about Richard. He, to me, was one of the most prolific creators of you know, contemporary artist. It's insane. But thank you.
I met Richard in a sub-basement on Broome and Crosby in '82. I was maybe 22 years old. I had just dropped out of SVA, and we had some mutual friends, and he was doing the shadow man paintings, and that flat black paint was flying around, and you know, I just wasn't really sure whether he was standoffish or shy, but we went on to have a friendship that even if I didn't see him for several years, we could pick up where we left off, and I went from being that 22-year-old kid to, you know, years would go by, years and then being a mom or what have you, but it's coincided quite nicely with all his different artistic eras, and I think that our conversation was deeply about paint, the magic of paint, what you can do with paint, and just the beauty and mystery of creation, which we're surrounded by right now. His work was stunningly beautiful and so composed, and he was such an exquisite artist that I'm just happy to be here and celebrate him. And our relationship was really, we always just talked about his paintings, and I know that when I went to see him, I saw him, you know, over the years, on and off all the time, and what I loved about him and some other people in the neighborhood is that when they have trouble walking, they ride a bicycle, and I think that kind of sums it up quite nicely. Like, you can't walk? Well, ride a bike.
He had scoliosis.
I understand. Yes, his health problems were severe. Yes, indeed, and he also was very fashionable and handsome and quite a lovely human being, and I'm sure there are other people that would be able to tell, you know, dates and times and art historical things much better than me, but I think it's really nice when you have a friend that you can pick up where you left off with over several decades, and that was my relationship with Richard. And we were painters together. We were painters together over the years, and one of the greatest moments was when I hung out with him in a Woodward gallery, and that work, he was so thrilled with it, and I know how he suffered, but I think it must have made him feel really good to be able to create something so beautiful, and that the beautiful paintings, they are beautiful, and that must have made him feel really good, and that makes me feel really happy, and isn't that the name of the game, really? I mean, and so I remember getting off my bicycle, riding back from my studio in the Navy Yard, and just hanging out with him and just talking about not like the overarching vision of his work, but just really specific areas, like say we'd be like, well, how about this area? And we would just we could talk like for hours just about very, very specific uses of paint. And man, when you just walk around a show like this, I mean, wow. I mean, he really was very specific and concise while being very spontaneous and loose and free, and harnessing something really deliberate between the head, the heart, and the hand. And I just was always very, very pleased with the time I spent with him, no matter what condition he was in. And he definitely suffered, and we didn't talk about that, and I didn't talk about, well, my 3 kids or my husband or my painting. We talked about my painting a little bit, poetry, but we really stuck to like what was really important. And you're looking at it, and what was really important to him was creating and making art, and he was so good at it that it's reverential. Like, it's just, so maybe I'll turn it over to
Curt.
Curt.
Well, when I was asked to do this, I told Aldo, I said, well, I knew Richard, but I didn't know Richard. And by that I mean, Richard wasn't the kind of guy that you would have over for dinner and have a dinner play and get to know him or anything like this. And I always, and walking around downtown, I've lived on the Bowery since 1978. And I remember first seeing back in the early 80s when the city was in the dumps. And all of a sudden, Richard tapped into a time in New York City that when you saw those shadow paintings around the thing, they were really something. And they just stuck with you. And he really was just right there at the moment with that, because it was a dark time in New York at the time, too. It was a mess, So, anyway, years later, I did this and that. I got back together with Arturo, and I became friends with Arturo in 1978 when we went to the Punk Art Show in Washington, D.C. together, and we formed a friendship. And the way we formed it is that I had done a painting of the Ramones that they all signed at CBGB's. And so Arturo and I became very good friends. Then we sort of lost track of each other because he went on touring with the band and I went on to go on with my career. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I had a show or something, and I invited him, he showed up. And we were just, like, no time had passed whatsoever. So this leads up that how I really kind of got to know Richard a little better was through Arturo. And, because I didn't know him, but Arturo would have parties, and I would go to the parties, of course, and Richard was there, and I always have a good conversation with him. He was very intelligent. And he also had a good sense of humor, and, he was a charming guy. And I also felt, which I'll more when we get to the photographs, this man was something really special about him. And this is the kind of feeling. Once in a while you kind of brush up people, but there was just something, you felt there was something there. And I've always felt, and I don't like tossing the word around genius too much, but I think he was pretty much of a genius. For me, this is just my own personal opinion as an artist. I know Keith was in this. I went with Keith and did the baby drawings, but they didn't even come close to the shadow stuff as far as impact went. And I really kind of feel that Richard didn't get, but I think he's beginning to get his place in the art history books of where he was back then, along with Keith and Jean-Michel. And it should be Richard Hambleton should be jammed in there too, because he was really, he was there. And his painting, he was a really he was a kind of a painter's painter. I'm a painter, but he was a painter's painter, and he did all that stuff, just like they were talking about with the paint and all that, different things. So at any rate, I knew when I was doing my downtown portrait circuit, if I don't make any sense, I'm sorry, I skip around a lot. I knew I wanted Richard to be in this book because he was back in the time when everybody that I photographed and painted were back in that same time too, which was the early 80s, and it was kind of, I look at the book, you can see it back there, it's called Downtown Portraits, and it's kind of like a yearbook and of people that were kind of around at the time. And, but I wanted to photograph Richard. Now this is where I'm going to start getting into the photos, because it was, I'm going to, now out of our chaos of what year 2026, I'm going to take you back to June of what year 2011. and a whole different time. Now, Richard was supposed to come over in the afternoon around 3 o'clock. Well, Richard, let's try it more. 11 o'clock at night. And Arturo came with him. And then we sat around drinking. I might have been an AA even at the time, but we had some amaretto or something. It wasn't very good, but we were talking about it. And this is again when I got that feeling. We were sitting on the floor of my studio, and Richard was talking, and we were talking about dope, of course, because I did heroin when I was younger and methadone and all that stuff and cleaned up. But I asked him, well, how much are you doing? He said $40K a year. And I went, wow, that's a lot of fucking dope. But he was astute enough, and I started telling him a little bit about myself, that I had some health problems, and he knew the health problems were called from a thing called endocarditis, which you get from dirty needles. Anyway, so now I'm in the studio, and I'm going to bring you back to the studio and photographing someone that I think was very special. And you had a sense that this guy, that wasn't just there was something about him, that there was some greatness that you couldn't cut through. And I got that feeling as I'm photographing him. But I learned a lot during this photo shoot. So anyway, you can see Arturo here. This is a book cover of Downtown Portraits, and that's the painting I chose out of the photographs. You'll see some of them tonight. And these photographs have never been shown anywhere. In fact, I haven't looked at them probably since 2011, because I basically put it away once I'm done. I did all the editing of the photos, and so out of the photos I did, this is the image I decided to use for the portrait. Now this portrait is 96 inches high by 70 inches wide, and it's acrylic on canvas. And anyway, I thought it captured him, and I didn't want to concentrate on the scar a point. But if you notice, he's got his style, and Richard always had his style. Like when he had the thing with Phillips, he dyed his suit green. He had a certain thing he wanted to do. He had a suit, and he dyed it green, and he knew when he was posing exactly what the hell he was doing. I knew that when I started photographing him, and you'll start to get the sense too that he had a certain. He knew how he wanted to look, like the photographs in there, where he's sticking his hand in there. So he was very conscious of all that underneath all this thing. Okay, so this is me with the gray card starting out. And you can see he's got his thumb down in his pants, and he's already kind of getting ready to roll. And okay, next. And here it is, same thing without the gray card. And the second shoot, let's go. Here we go. And now he's starting to come at me. And you can look at him. You can look at his eyes, and he knows what he's doing. And he's still got the thumb down around the pant. Next, but he's using his hand. Watch this hand. At one point, he does one where it's like a gun, and he's using it to go off. Okay, next. Here we go. Okay, keep flipping. We can go. Now there you go. You can see. So now he's kind of got that thing going on there. So he had this style that he knew, and he knew it was cool. And he really gave off the image of cool. And even as fucked up as he was, he was pretty cool, but he had a certain way that he wanted to portray himself. Okay, next, let's go. I'm going to let the photos now just speak for themselves, sort of. So I'm bringing you back, we're 2011, in my studio, 11 o'clock at night. We've just gotten done with our conversation. Our tour you'll see in a minute. And this is Richard during the photo shoot. So let's keep going, Doug. Bang. Bang. And here you can see on his hands in that back one, that you can see some of the track marks and stuff like that. And when I painted it too, I didn't want to get that necessarily, because like I say, I didn't want to make that a dominant thing of the painting about the drugs and stuff like that. I just wanted it to be Richard. And unfortunately, he was going through this thing with the cancer, and he had just gotten this thing, and I actually helped him go to a dentist to have all his teeth fixed. And I told him my dentist does a tooth work for art, but it's got to be this. Well, of course, Richard gave him a few little beautiful paintings, little ones, and then a portrait of him, but he never gave him the big one he was supposed to get, so he sort of stiffed the dentist. But the dentist got him into Sloan Kettering, and he was telling the doctors, of course, the same thing, and I think he owes a half a dozen doctors up at Sloan Kettering some paintings. Because he was a little unreliable in that sense. And then also when he went to the dentist's office, my dentist had a secretary that actually was his girlfriend and that, and she always, because I had a lot of friends that would go to him because for dental work. And the one thing I know about, believe me, is when you're a poor artist, it says, do you want to buy paint or dentist? Paint or dentist? And you always wind up going with the paint. And so your teeth get screwed up. So, but the secretary, every time someone would come in, she goes, is this one of Hoppe's friends? But he was always late, and he finally showed up once in a while. But he got his new teeth, and he looked pretty good for the Phillips show. We can just keep going. He's going to start moving around a little bit now. You know, underneath it all, he actually was a very good-looking guy. And you look at his eyes and that, too. He's, there he is again with the gun hand, and now he's having some fun. Loosening up.
He was very concise, and it showed in his work.
Yeah. No, he knew exactly what he was doing as I was shooting these photos, and he knew exactly the image that he wanted to project. This is kind of dark. You know, the one thing I have to say about Richard, for me, he, again, I say for me, as opposed to some of the other artists, that he was, to me, the opposite of Herring. That he had a dark side, like those shadows and that kind of thing were cute with the little babies, but then you had this dark shadow man, and like I say, I always just loved it. He was like the opposite. Here we go with Arturo. Now you see they both got the glasses that they've been drinking. Arturo loved him. What?
Did they bring their own amaretto, or did you supply it?
No, I had it. I think that, but that's all I had. I don't know, I might have been an AA at the time. Artie was so happy. But that's, Arturo, like I said, basically, he supported Richard. And he, you know, over all these years and bought all these paintings. They're unbelievable. And he would always tell me he'd go over to the studio. He says, oh, he's working on this new thing now where he's taking little jewelry and starting to paint eyes on it and stuff like that. He was just, Arturo was just in awe of Richard's talent. And then he, one thing, the one red beautiful painting that's around the back that's over there, I remember was hanging in Arturo's, I think it was in the bedroom, and Arturo wasn't happy with it. And he made Richard take it back because it had a little fleck that had to be perfect. And Richard finally did it. And another story I have Arturo told me this, and it sounds pretty far-fetched, but as far as trusting him, he said when one time he had to leave the loft and Richard was there, he was supposed to paint for him, but he didn't trust him to be alone, so he literally chained him up and told him to paint the painting with a chain around him so he couldn't steal anything.
I find
I
that
kind of don't remember
What?
him ever stealing from friends.
Well, no,
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm just so sorry.
No, I'm not trying to make Richard out to be a thief. All
Yeah,
I know
he
is
was
that
not-
well, maybe
he's
he
not.
just, Arturo made
He
it
didn't want
into
him
a
to
joke.
leave
I don't
or
know.
use or
But
something
Arturo
like
did
that.
tell me that.
He was, the only thing that Richard stole was paintbrushes.
No,
And stuff like that.
I'm not trying to believe.
Maybe he
I'm not-
sold other things, but like, I don't.
No, I'm just
I just
saying-
don't want people to think he was a thief.
No, he
with
wasn't.
Friends.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I'm just trying to say that Arturo told me this. I don't know if it was true or not or whatever, but he said, because he had to paint him in this, he wanted him, and he had to go out and, chained him up and said, you got to finish painting this. Maybe it was just like, I'm chaining you into the loft until you finish this painting.
Right, probably.
But I'm not trying to, say anything really negative about
but
Richard.
that's-
Trust
but
me.
that's something
We can
because-
save this for social media.
No, there was that kind of dark stuff, a lot of it there, but when you look at the art, there's so much beauty, so isn't it so counterintuitive that, and so two sides of the coin of Richard, that there was such heroic
Yeah.
beauty in his work, but then like daily life was not always sunshine and flowers, right?
No, towards the end, I remember, he was down on the Bowery and he was trying to get a hotel room, and I helped him get into like one of the World Hotel or one of those Bowery hotels. And then eventually what happened is he moved over to the Solita Hotel and he got a room in there. Now, we could go on about all the times with the oligarchs and trashing the loft in Soho, and but he was over at the Solita Hotel, and now, I never was over there, so I don't know, but I'm only going with some friends that bought a lot of artwork from him, and I know him very well, a guy named Mad Hatter. But Richard would go up on the roof and paint, and then they have a lot of Japanese tourists coming there. Richard would tell them, oh, I'm a famous painter, go Google me. And he'd come back, and then he'd whip a painting out and get himself a quick $5,000, out of it. I mean, he was,
Right on.
good at that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So, but he was at the Solita Hotel kind of at the end there, and then he made the deal with Andy and Vlad, and supposedly, I don't know, he signed it, and he bought this apartment, he got a lot of money, and I don't know, whatever, I'm not gonna get into the whole thing, but I don't know, it just at the end was pretty rocky, and it did, like you said, did come really quick, after he really stumbled into this, finally got sold all this stuff supposedly. So, anyway.
Yeah, and Richard, honestly, I mean, Richard was really just a lovely, beautiful man, and he was also very concerned about his looks and how people saw him. And so this stage of his life was one of the most difficult out of all, because not only was it physically, emotionally draining, but he was a man who was, just to give you guys a context, a lot of vanity. But he was. They called them the Gang of Four for a while. It was Basia, Herring, Richard, and someone else, I can't remember. But and Richard was on the cover of Life magazine. He, out of that whole crew, was making more money than anybody, and and they were all friends. And Richard decided, fuck this, I'm going to Europe and for something, and it was like, I think he went for a biennial or something like that, and then he stayed, and everybody else came back, and all of a sudden, he was on Life magazine. Street art is a big thing. It was when all the street art was becoming fine art. He was like the poster child. He was a handsome guy, always in an army suit, and that the hand in his thing was like a signature thing. He would paint barefoot. It was like a whole thing. So when he stayed, they came back and they all got really famous because everybody was eating it up after the biennial, and then all the hype about the street art, and Deitch was involved. Everybody was involved. It was crazy, just money everywhere. You know what I mean? And he came back, and he burnt a lot of bridges. But as compelling as images are of when he is riddled with cancer and at the hardest part of his life, you will be able to see a video if you come back of Richard when he was how he would have wanted to be remembered, which was a beautiful man with an incredible spirit. He was the shadow man to the extreme, the shadow that he lived with, but just like dark and lightness, you know what I mean, which creates shadow. That was Richard. And one other little tidbit, when he died, somebody could look up the date, it was like right before Halloween. It was either the Halloween, I remember it was at night. Anyways, and I always thought, well, they call it the thinnest veil at that time of year, when the veil between the living and the dead, the light and the dark, the shadow and the light.
Well, we're here on January
And that's
13th.
when he
Friday the 13th tonight, excuse me.
and then that's when he passed. So throughout his life, the shadow man, the extreme between lifestyle, body, health,
The crime scene.
wealth,
lines,
the whole thing. His life was very that.
and
So
beauty, all that.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah. I don't know. Should we just end
There
there?
you have it.
Yeah, I think we should. Maybe we'll do a few rounds of questions, and then what do you think? All right, let's do like, what do you think, guys? Like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of questions?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I have a mic out here, so maybe we can, anybody's got any questions?
If anybody has any questions, I don't know. We got one over there.
Yeah, maybe if you,
Yeah, we're setting it up. We're gonna switch with you. Oh, no, you have a cordless one, yeah.
Yeah, they're taking this one.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, who, you, Bobby? Yes. Let me come over to you, just so we can all hear you.
I enjoy very much what you guys did today. And Ann, you were great, and so were you, and you were nice too. Anyway, my comment is, I didn't know Richard from a hole in the wall when I first saw those shadow figures, but can anyone comment on what I believe? A man that expressed genius, as history shows us, often has a lot of little picadillos that would make him hard to be defined. And when I say that, is genius a form of insanity? And that is what we interpret it, because we choose to be great art. Thank you. Did anyone get what I was saying?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you.
Can you give, and, oh, you have a mic? Okay.
No, I agree.
We all have mics. Well, I like what Ann was saying, that he really was unwavering in his vision of himself and his work, and there was no question. That was all he cared about. And I enjoyed being with him. I always felt good when I was around him, because when I was with him, we were in that place where we were just like, this is what we're doing, this is what we believe in, this is what he did it, and did it well, and did it every day or thereabouts, but like, this is not like a, fair weather, this is a kind of commitment, that is extremely deep, and it's, if I may, kind of the connection between earth and heaven and eternity. Your art is what connects you, and when you're not living well or life is very hard, your connection in what maybe will help you feel better in the day-to-day hardship is what gets you through, is because you're doing something really, really significant and important, and you're doing it well. And I just, once again, I really hope that made him feel good, like a lot, you know, because life is hard for everyone. It was really hard for him. There's just such a beauty to that. I hope that touched on what you were speaking of. I think that's a really big question of whether it's genius is, I think greater, that the jury's still out on that one, but it's definitely a part of it, or addiction, and, you know, there's just that's rich and fertile ground, you know. Can't help you with that, but I hope I contributed something to that effect.
You have another question here?
Hi, I'm very blessed by this exhibit, and how I came across Richard was through the documentary. I had no idea. I grew up with art. My grandfather was a really talented artist through watercolor. And what got me with that documentary, and it just pressed upon me, was the cadavers, the outlining of the bodies that he did on the sidewalk. And I was just blown away. And in his mind, this is what I took from it, that he was just being himself. He was just simplistic in drawing those cadavers. And then the police thought they were actually, what I took it, were actually things that, incidences that happened and the bodies were moved. And so,
Question?
but I'm getting to that. With the cadavers, what was he trying to convey?
Are you talking about the the paint outlines,
Right,
that
right,
stuff?
right.
Well, I mean, okay, I can answer that really simply. Basically, Richard was also always with his art looking for some sort of impact, some sort of reaction,
Right.
some sort of you
Right.
know, and again, dark and light, you know, to paint these random crime scene, these
Well, wasn't it
chalk outlines.
Mr. Reed?
I'm sorry.
They were done by Mr. Reed?
Oh yeah, Mr. Reed.
Yes.
I forgot about that. Yeah, it was code name. It was all
Yeah.
secretive,
Yeah.
and that was his first, or not first, but first really known popular version
That
of
got
the
the
street art,
attention,
right?
yeah.
And then they became upright, became shadows, and those were also impactful at the time because the neighborhood was completely different. So when you saw these shadows that were painted in like weird little corners, and he would do like cats and people, and like they were always like, and honestly, because it's a different vibe that you have when you're walking down a street that has burnt out buildings, and there's, you know, dealers on the corner, and oh my God, am I get raped by the time I walk down the street? You know what I mean? Like everything is like you're thinking everything, and then all of a sudden, like you turn a corner and there's like something that wasn't there yesterday, and it's like a shadow of this darkness jumping out at you. So you know, I don't think people can relate to that at this point because of all of the vibes that have to go with it. But yeah, that was his thing, is impact into, you know, connection, and you know, embedding his work into your brain.
I wanted to add that he also used the name Dick Trace It, which is in some of the mail art booklets that are back there. I call it mail art booklets because it was at the same time there was a movement out west and around the world of people trading small art through the mail, and he created stamps in one of the limited edition books that we have back there from 1980, and then there's another book there too that has great illustrations inside, the edition of 500 that also used Dick Trace It.
Yeah, the mail art was great. We shouldn't forget about that. And those body outlines, that was like coming right out of the gate there, pretty strong, man. Let's not forget. That was like, you know, the year and time that was like
Late
that was
70s in Vancouver.
That was a big deal.
Right?
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah, that was like big splash in the pond, right? I mean, that was.
Yeah, there were other pamphlets that we don't have in the show that talk about the Murderers Inc. That series that he brought to New York, and so he had already was really involved in a lot of publishing with his art, including a large piece called Stroke back there from 1980. You'll see it where there's just pages. We are displaying the centerfold, but actually there's some other beautiful pieces. The early splash, plant stock. There's the name of a couple of them. Anyway, go ahead. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, I just remember Richard from the gas station and him scurrying here and there when Spooky lived there. Spooky was in one broom closet and he was in another.
DJ Spooky?
Yeah, DJ Paul Miller was living there. I kind of rescued Paul because I said to Paul, if you stay here, you know, Paul told me at the time, DJ Spooky was, I knew him from The Voice. He said, sorry, I'm indulging me a story, but he said, I'm going to be famous by 26 and dead by 28. And I said, oh no, don't pull another Basquiat. And then later they were going to cast him as Basquiat, but he was delving in the dope with Richard. And I was like, we got to get you out of here. So I brought him to my apartment in Brooklyn. And it was also because there was no heat. And you know, but Richard was living the life. Like Spooky was like, you know, dabbling. And he wrote some beautiful music at the time. Songs of a Dead Dreamer, his album was when Richard was living there.
As far as Richard goes, I know Spooky and all that. And he had quite a career and do very well. But as far as Richard, Ann was living with Richard there at the gas station, right?
Well, Spooky was also living there at a certain point, maybe. I mean, maybe just different periods.
I don't remember him living there, but
I mean, there was over time.
People stayed over sometimes.
No, he paid.
There's a lot of visitors.
No, he was paying rent.
Some people had to pay just to come in, so yeah.
And we were doing a party called Abstract. But anyway, what I wanted to ask, because I never saw these beautiful landscape paintings, I never saw these works, was what do the stripes mean? Do you guys know? Like, is that?
These are really, really intense.
Yes, the fact that he put that in there, you know, so it's definitely.
I think that's a great question because it means he was, to me, I mean, I think he was really looking at a lot of art at the time and taking it all in and putting it in there and I mean,
honestly, I don't even know.
Who would like to comment on that?
I mean, to me,
they were sick. That's a big deal. Like, have you seen the thickness of this and the red? I mean, this is, you know, yeah.
But these, like, it's like, is he looking through panes? Is he looking through a window? Or are you? Yeah.
That's part of it. Yeah, let's hear.
You know, I think that Richard was very aware of modern movements, and you know, Barnett Newman would paint zips, what he called zips, into his painting.
Richard said that to me too.
And so Richard was very aware of you know, abstraction and really was very knowledgeable about art history. So, you know, what he was doing was a kind of synthesis of modernism pushed into a kind of no-wave aesthetic that was happening in the city at the same time. And he was able to encapsulate that in his work. So he was always bringing in influences from the past, projecting it into the future. So, you know, it's very difficult to do what Richard did as a painter, using this kind of mud pie abstraction where a splash can become a kind of Rorschach for you know, the figure. And this is a time when figuration was coming into New York in painting, where it had been excluded during the late 70s and coming into the 80s. This was a kind of a real transition in what was happening. So it was all intentional, but it was a quote. It was Richard's way of quoting his knowledge about modernism.
Extremely tasteful, as a Bryce Martin or a Robert Motherwell. Extremely high-level aestheticism.
I think. I also think his work he worked in Vancouver for like 10 some years, and out in San Francisco. I think a lot of that work was very systemic, and the also the Shadowman New York paintings. You know, in like 81, 82, he had this mind that he could create these gigantic systems when people were actually also doing systemic art.
Oh, yeah. We could take one last question.
Thank you for explaining that.
Any more questions? Good. Well, if we...
I don't have a question, just a comment.
Okay, keep it short.
I've been in front of this painting, and one of the things that strike me is the symmetry and symmetry asymmetry and symmetry of the painting. First of all, it's a figurative because it's a cloud. It's a cloud that expands like in a spirit, has a lot of spiritual aspect in it. But the cloud is not cut in the middle, it's cut on the side. And the red lines, vertical red lines on top of the black, are symmetric. So I think it's incredible how, the mind that you have to produce this kind of relation between something that we think is very high, but is very low, because the horizontal line is low in the lower part, third lower part of the painting. So it just was the only comment I have, and it's extraordinary.
It shows an incredible amount of confidence.
Exactly. It shows you're a genius.
It's very confident work.
Yeah. Thank you.
That part, yeah.
When you look at this particular painting that you made a comment about, you will see that the black bars going down with the pink are out.
Yes.
They're a thicker paint or material. It could even be tape.
It's thick paint.
Yeah, it looks like tape, but I haven't gotten that close to
I
it.
just spoke the bottom of it.
Great.
I know, don't just see our.
So, anything else from our panel? We're so honored to have the three of you give your talk.